So welcome to the Lens Studio Twitch stream. I'm Travis, work on Lens Studio, and this is...
I'm Amir, excited to be here.
Yeah, so today we're going to be covering three different things. The first thing is we'll be covering the new 2.0 release. So all of the new features that was added in 2.0 a couple weeks ago. The second thing I want to do is actually walk through our newly added post effect features. And so that basically allows you to create these really cool screen effects with different kind of visual effects that you apply to your lens. So that's actually not reflected in some of the templates we'll walk through, so I want to walk through that kind of separately. And then to end, Amir has actually created this really cool lens that utilizes hand tracking, which is our kind of newly added ability to track different objects in the screen, in this case hand, but kind of using it in a different way in comparison to how it's used in the template. So let's dive in. So first, with the Lens Studio screen open, we're going to kind of look at some of the new templates and new technologies we've added in Lens Studio 2.0 in the latest release. And again, this Lens Studio 2.0, it's already out, so you can go to lensstudio.snapchat.com and download it today with the top right download button. So let's walk through the first row of new templates are what we consider our object tracking templates. And so basically what object tracking is the ability to track certain objects in the scene that the camera finds. In this case, we have the pet template, which tracks cats and dogs. We have the body template, which tracks a body. This is great for a rear camera experience where your user is kind of farther away from the camera than they might be in like a selfie experience where we usually rely on face. And then finally we have hand, which tracks a hand that comes in and out of the scene. So why don't we dive in first to the pet template. So again, the pet template allows you to attach images and animation to your pets. This would be a cat or dog's face. It actually allows you to kind of anchor elements to both the eyes, the mouth, and the top of the head or the center of the head. So Amir has the template open. Here we can see in the inspector panel the ability to really just easily tune what images are attached to the various features of your pet, in this case a cat. So for example, those eyes are attached to the right eye and left eye point in the pet. And it's as easy as importing your own custom images to this template and adjusting those. So moving on, we're going to open up the body tracking template. Like I said, body tracking is really great for actual rear camera experiences, where selfie experiences you might be really focused on kind of the upper body and face. Body tracking is really great when your camera is looking out at, let's say, a group of people or somebody standing in a room. And here you can put things attached to the body. So for example, you can attach a rainy cloud animation to the top of somebody's head, and as they walk around the room, this rainy cloud will follow them. APOC says every stream the production value goes up. Yeah, we are joking. We're just going to keep adding stuff to the stream. Eventually we'll just be replaced by robots. Yeah, the green screen's amazing, by the way. I love it. Our team here is killing it with the stream production value. So, okay, going back to the body tracking. Again, great for rear camera experiences. With body tracking, you're able to attach to the center of the body, but also the left and right shoulder. One thing I will say that's really cool with body tracking is not only is it really great for these rear camera experiences, but it also does work when the user comes up much closer to the camera. So you kind of get best of both worlds here with body. Obviously, if you're going to do a face experience here, you're going to want to use face tracking. But this is and you can always augment it with face tracking. So for example, you can have body tracking paired with face tracking. But you'll see here in the webcam, it's actually tracking me even though I'm effectively in the kind of more selfie camera mode. So moving on, we're going to go to the hand tracking template. And very similar to the other two templates in the object tracking category that we covered, the hand tracking template allows you to attach 2D images and 2D animations to the hand. One thing that this template also does is it has an example of basically triggering something in the scene when the hand arrives. So you'll see here, as I'm moving my hand in, this hand on top of my head, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but we liked it, kind of comes to life. So it's sleeping, hand comes in, hand awakes. And so this is an example of how we can trigger things with the object being found. Note that how this works in the hand tracking template could also be applied to the other two kind of object tracking templates as well. The one thing I want to bring up, we actually get this question occasionally from some lens creators, is how our object tracking is kind of 2D coordinate based. So it's basically understanding where in the 2D screen position the hand exists. But we actually do have a helper script on lensstudio.snapchat.com. So if you go under guides, tracking, guides, general tracking, and under object tracking, at the very bottom of this guide, there's a section called object tracking in 3D objects. And there we've actually included a script that allows you to basically attach a 3D object to that kind of traditionally object track 2D point, and then basically kind of project that 3D object in kind of 3D space. And so this is great if you, for example, let's say you have a really cool 3D kind of power effect that you want to attach to your hand. I would use this script and then attach it to the 2D object tracking. And one little note here, when you apply rotation, we only track Z rotation with the hand tracking, so that Z rotation is applied, so kind of this direction, but we're not going to get the rotation if you're kind of rotating your hand in this direction. Although that's something I think we want to explore a little bit in scripts and see if we can give you guys something with that. So we'll kind of play around with that and maybe get back to you. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the other kind of 2.0 features. The next two I want to talk about are simple high score and high score. We're just going to dive into high score, but I want to talk a little bit about what the difference between simple high score and high score is. And so with Lens Studio 2.0, we added the ability to basically save persistent data with the lens itself. And so you can kind of compare this to like a video game. When you go and save your game and then you can turn off your console, this is what we're doing with the lens. We're saving data to the phone that when you close the lens carousel and reopen it, that data will be saved with the lens. So what simple high score is basically a very simple example of basically adding persistent data to a lens at its very, very basic kind of level. Just basically saving and loading that data. It's a one script example of how to do that. High score is using that kind of simple system of saving persistent storage, but enabling kind of a more complex game on top of it. So let's just dive into high score and kind of see what that looks like. So kind of opening up high score, you'll see that it's much more complicated than the simple high score. What I love here for, I think, creators that are trying to explore kind of more interactive experiences, scripting their experiences, this kind of can be used as almost an example project for how to create maybe a more complex project. So again, it's using persistent data, but more in kind of a complete package. And so one of the things I want to point out in this example, why don't you just play the game real quick? So you click and play the rooster, collect the eggs, hold to kind of float, and then if you hit one of these potholes, the chicken sadly goes away, and it saves the high score at that point. So when you go back to the main screen, it says best high score is 4. Anytime I come back to the lens, regardless of if I closed out of the carousel or not, it'll show me that high score of 4. Some really cool things is that the high score template has an example of like a state machine. So if you're making a complex state-based system, you can kind of look at this template as an example. It also has a collision system, so you might be able to take that collision system to incorporate into your project if you need to check where two things might collide with each other. So check it out, especially if you want an example of how a more complicated project in Lens Studio is built. been wanting to do an endless fighter with that template. Would love to see it. Yeah. I don't even know what that is, but I'm in. I have ideas in my mind of endless fighter. Got it. Yeah, except with endless letters, kind of like, right. Awesome. Yeah, would love to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's close out of this project. The other one that we added, this is actually kind of a revisit from our last stream where we walked through the new paperhead template. Paperhead template is now part of the tool. It's built into the tool selectable from the template screen. So we won't go into too much detail there because we walked through it last stream, but now it's included in the tool. Really quickly, I want to open the cutout template. With the cutout template, we actually had a cutout template in the previous version of Lens Studio, actually even the first version of Lens Studio. But it was kind of hard to use, a little complicated for what is a very simple use case of adding a 2D image to the world as a rear camera world lens. And so what we've done is just made basically a better version of the cutout template based off of feedback we've been hearing from you guys on this specific template. So here, all you do is import a resource into your resources panel and set the texture for the cutout to controller to what you want that texture to be. It's what the cutout template should have been from the start. You don't have to mess around with materials or alpha or anything like that. You just import an image and you set it to whatever you want it to be. The other cool thing is the cutout controller builds in a 2D shadow by default if you want it. So you'll see here that Amir's creating a new cutout controller. He's going to set it to a specific texture and then enable the shadow, and you'll see the shadow on the ground kind of come to life. You don't have to worry about how to set up the shadow. You just checkbox enable it and you're good to go. And then the other cool thing about the cutout, which you might have saw Amir do, is he actually just copied that cutout controller and duplicated it. And so you can now have as many of these cutout objects in the scene as you want. All of those objects are movable by the user, scalable by the user, everything you can do with a world object, all without kind of having to worry about it. And yeah, the shadow is awesome. The shadow is actually pretty interesting. It takes the silhouette of the 2D image and kind of projects that as a shadow in space. So actually, as you move the light around, you'll actually see that real-time shadow adapt to the lighting, which is pretty neat. It's a cool way to get like a 3D effect from a 2D image. So hopefully you guys have a lot of fun with that one. Again, trying to make the use case of putting a GIF in the rear camera as easy as possible. And would love to see what you guys do with this one. But really this was just to try to make things easier for you, where this use case was actually a little complicated in the past. Okay, closing out, we'll move to our next kind of big feature of Lens Studio 2.0. If you scroll to the bottom of templates, you have our 5 new landmarker templates. I can kind of consider these as in like kind of beta program where we're kind of exploring adding new landmarkers as we go. But right now there's these 5 landmarkers: Chinese Theater, the U.S. Capitol Building, Flatiron in New York, Buckingham Palace in UK, and the Eiffel Tower. Why don't we open the Eiffel Tower to give an example? What landmarkers are is basically it's the ability to, in the same way I can attach something to my head, I can attach something to a real world building. And so basically if you have the lens and you go to one of these landmark locations and you look at the building, the objects that you place relative to that building will be just like you placed them in Lens Studio. So this is how we created some experiences you might have seen with like the Game of Thrones dragon flying on top of the Flatiron building. That's something that utilized landmarkers and the landmarker templates. In that case, the Flatiron landmarker template. So here we have the Eiffel Tower template open. Amir switched his preview video to the Eiffel Tower preview video, and you'll actually see the content that you've placed in Lens Studio relative to the Eiffel Tower. And if you were actually at the Eiffel Tower, those flowers would be actually on the Eiffel Tower. And so this technology, very, very, very complicated from a how it works standpoint, but from a how you make it standpoint in the template, it's actually pretty easy. You can kind of compare it to attaching a 3D object to face, where you just drag and drop it underneath the face. In this case, Amir's taking a 2D billboard or a 2D image and dragging it and dropping it to be a child of the Eiffel Tower. Instead of the face, it's now the Eiffel Tower, and he's going to scale it up In this case, I think we're putting glasses on the Eiffel Tower. And just position it relative to the Eiffel Tower in the 3D scene. And then you'll notice in the preview video, now those glasses are on the Eiffel Tower. And again, what's crazy is he could submit this lens now, fly to Paris, because Amir likes to get away, and basically see exactly what he built here applied to the Eiffel Tower. So again, very complicated tech that we've tried to make as easy as possible for you to create some amazing experiences with. So that's kind of Lens Studio 2.0 as a whole. Some of the big new features. I did want to go into what is maybe a little more of a hidden feature in Lens Studio 2.0, but I think is really like incredibly useful for the community, especially of lens creators. Basically we're going to talk about post effects, which is actually one of our most used, like I would consider, component or effects in Lens Studio. We see a lot of color filter lenses. Those are all using post effect. And so what we've done is we had one type of post effect, which was color correction. And so we've taken that color correction, it's still there, but we've also added like 10 plus more post effects to the list of post effects you can choose from. So to add a post effect, we're going to go to Add New and select Post Effect. Color correction is still there. It's the first result. So that's post effect as you remember post effect. You can also go to Add New and under Color Correction, see all of your preset color corrections that we've had in Lens Studio since we added the post effect feature. But back to post effect, we have a bunch of new types of post effect that give you basically a really cool screen effect that you can tune. So the first one we're going to select is Analog TV. Let's try that out. Okay, so here you'll see that my preview video all of a sudden became kind of like a 80s, 90s CRT television. And so this is a new post effect that gives you that kind of look. You couldn't have done that with the color correction post effect. Tuning the post effect is a little different than how you tuned the post effect before, so we did want to go through that. Here, instead of selecting the post effect in the Objects panel and tuning in the inspector, you select the post effect resource in the Resources panel. So he's going to select the post effect material and then tune it in the Inspector panel. So here you can see as he's dragging up and down the noise intensity, it's kind of tuning this effect. He's also distorting the screen like an old CRT television, that kind of thing. And then, okay, so let's go to some other post effects. So Add New. What's another cool one? I want to show gradient, color gradient. So color gradient's really cool because it basically gives you some of the functionality that a lot of people have been using in color correction, but in a very like at your fingertips kind of way. So what it does is it basically takes the color spectrum that is being seen by the camera and then kind of assigns color groups to various points along that spectrum. So Amir, for example, all of the low color spectrum colors that is the camera seeing, it's kind of setting to a darkish purple, while the high color spectrum, it's setting to a brighter pink. And so you'll see that with just kind of simple 4-color tuning, Amir's been able to create a pretty interesting post effect. You know, I would compare this one to like how like the Barack Obama Hope poster looks, where it's kind of 4 colors that have kind of been blended with a real life image. And so let's go to a different post effect. Let's do Add New again, and select, let's see, Dithering. Dithering, this is one of my favorite kind of screen effects. Basically what dithering does is kind of give you like almost like a newspapery type effect. You actually, with dithering, you have the option to have it be dithered as grayscale or dithered as color. So I like the color version because it brings in a little more of the camera. But you get this kind of cool, almost like newspaper printed vibe with your lens that you can play around with. And again, by selecting the resource in the Resources panel and modifying it in the Inspector panel, you can fully tune the post effect. So let's try another one. Add New, post effect, and I think let's try Pixelate. So pixelation. The pixelation post effect, we get asked this quite a bit actually, is how do you pixelate the screen, which is pretty funny. We try for the best camera quality and then people want to lower it. Here you'll see Amir is playing with the pixel size of the pixelation effect. And basically it's as simple as tuning a slider. You can actually do that before in Lens Studio, but you kind of had to go through cameras and be a little hacky with it. Here it's just a nice post effect that you can add to the scene. And let's do one more, edge detection. This one's really fun because I want to pair this with dithering. So what edge detection does is it actually kind of intelligently goes through the scene and finds kind of continuous edges. So it's actually seeing like my sweater here as a continuous edge, and it's adding a dark line to it, in this case like a red line or a cyan line. One really cool effect I want to show you right now is if we set this to black like Amir's doing, and then let's enable our dithering, and here's a really good point, and he's going to put edge, because we want edge detection to run before dithering. What's really cool here is we're basically able to kind of like chain different effects together, one after another. Here we're able to create, again, like a comic book type effect. Yeah, Kratz Reborn says, Kratos Reborn says instant comic book. So you can kind of play with comic book like effects. So you'll see that now I have a nice edge on my sweater here that kind of gives me that comic book look. I've seen some lens creators kind of getting that Spider-Man, the vibe going with some lenses, which has been really cool to see. Car graphics. You can also edit the material properties in script. Yeah, that's huge here. So all of these properties that you can edit in the actual inspector, all of those can be scripted. So for example, if I wanted to dynamically tune up and down the color of the edge, for example, for my edge detection, that could be done in script. Or for example, if you wanted, I've seen some lenses where it actually adds a color picker slider to the side. You could actually drive that color picker to be driving the line around the user. It's pretty fun to kind of play with the post effects and also play with how they intermingle with each other. I think we saw a lens. I don't know who created it. I wish I knew who, but it was a kind of Mondrian-like painting, and we think how it worked. I haven't tried it, but I think what they did was they took the color gradient, then applied pixelation to it, then applied the edge detection to be edge detecting around the pixelation, and you got this really cool like highlighted pixel but hyper colored kind of type lens. And so that's what you can kind of do with the combination of all of these post effects. Now, if that creator, if they're on here, or if they see this afterwards, if you did it in another way, I would be very interested to know how. Okay, and so please add a regular blur to post effect. Noted. Thank you, APOC. We'll look into that for sure. I just found recently you can look at the property names and reference via strip just by hovering. Yeah, that's a little known fact that Car Graphics is pointing out. So can you show that? So basically select your material, go to your mouse, and hover over one of these properties. And if you, so basically any material property, you just hover your mouse over and it'll show you the scriptable name for that property. And then you would just script it by going main pass dot, and in this case it's dot intensity. And so it makes it really easy to kind of understand how to script that. Just go to the material itself, hover over, you're good to go. Okay, that was a lot, because we added a lot in Lens Studio 2.0. The other thing I'm not going to walk through now, but I do want to walk through probably in our next stream, is the screen transform system. Maybe we can just add a new screen image right now. So go to add new and screen image. With screen transform, we're basically enabling you to create much more powerful and complex UI. By default, if you add a screen transform and just kind of drag it around like you had been doing with Billboard, or add a screen image and drag it around, it acts just like Billboard used to. But you have now, with screen transform, a lot of power to, for example, pin that to a corner or stretch it based on the width of the screen or the height of the screen. And this will allow you to create kind of more complex UI, but also be very adaptive to device resolutions. The other thing I'll mention is in the bottom of the preview panel, we added device resolutions for the webcam. So you have this simulation mode where you can actually switch over to iPhone X, you can switch over to like a LG G6. So these kind of common resolutions, and also some of the resolutions that give lenses some problems because they're not being adaptive to the resolution. So I think in a later stream or tutorial video, we'll go into much more detail about screen transform, but that's another big thing that was added in 2.0 that really kind of ups the game for creating more complex UI. So that was item 2, post effects. Item 1, Lens Studio 2.0. Item 3 is Amir is now going to walk us through a lens he created using Lens Studio 2.0's hand tracking in a different way from the hand tracking template, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
So let's open up the project and just like see what it does, and then we start to creating that project.
I think camera's on me. Okay,
Yeah,
so here's the project. Yeah. Tell me what to do.
So as you can see, the lens is so dirty, and you can now use your hand to just like clean the lens. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can do a lot with that. Like right now, you can just like you're cleaning the screen, but you can just like paint on the screen. Like there's endless possibility with this.
We've seen a couple lenses like this in the community where it's been like drawing on the screen.
Yeah.
Or like having your head or blowing the screen.
Yeah.
But this what's kind of interesting here is Amir's using the hand to drive that kind of cleaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start with new project.
Cool.
Let's create a new project. And okay. So the first thing that we're gonna need to do is just like add the hand tracking. So to add the hand tracking, it's super simple as clicking on Add New, go to Object Tracking, and then Hand Tracking. Now you have a hand tracking. It's simple as that. It's working fine, and now your hand is tracking. But I want to apply my own texture to it. So let me bring some of the texture that I already made here. So one of them is white texture. It doesn't have anything. Another one is this faded one, and this one is a dirt texture that I imported in.
The thing we're actually going to wipe away.
Yeah. Okay. So let's put the white, and in here in 2D editor you can just like change the size of the sprite, and you can just like put it anywhere that you want to on the hand. So for now I'm gonna just like put it on the center of palm. And then I think we're good. Yeah. So next thing that I'm gonna talk about is camera render target. So what is render target? Render target is an output of the camera. Like every camera needs output. Like if you wanna have output, you can write that output on a texture. So right now
you can kind of think of them as like dynamic textures that the cameras write to and continually write to.
Yeah. When you open any project in Lens Studio, it comes with default render target. So I'm gonna rename it to main render target for now so we can remember it. So as you can see, the first camera that we have is rendering onto main render target, and also orthographic camera is also rendering on that main target.
So they like basically stack on top of each other.
Yes, exactly.
Camera goes first, orth goes first, all into the same texture. Yeah.
So to achieve that painting effect, I need one more of, I need to separate these two from each other. I need one for orthographic camera and one for main camera.
Right.
So we need to create a new render target. To create a new render target, you just go to the resources panel, add new, and then render target. So we create a new one. Let's rename it to, I'm gonna rename it to paint render target. And
so this is where our painting is gonna go.
Yeah. And also I want to change my camera name to painting camera.
Sure.
And then attach select the render target and select the paint render target. Now it's gone.
Oh no.
Yeah, because there is like right now we're seeing the main render target in the preview, and we don't see the paint render target anymore. So how can we just like see what is happening in our scene? So in Lens Studio 2.0, we added a new panel called Scene Config. So you can just like find it here, or you can just like go up here and just like panel, Scene Config, and just like add it to your scene. I'm gonna put it right here for now. So as you can see right now, our main render target that it's rendering into the preview is main render target. So if you want to see the hand tracking, we just add the paint render target in here. Now you can see that.
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah. And also another cool thing is in the scene config, you can see the rendering order of the cameras, and you can change it easily by dragging and dropping
Right.
up and down.
So what Capture and Live Target does is basically it's what Snapchat renders. So it's Snapchat's always going to render one of the render targets.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this case, you've told it to render the paint.
Exactly.
Just a little nuance here, and this is something we've also added for Lens Studio 2.0. The difference between Capture Target and Live Target is that Capture Target is actually what is captured after the final snap. So it's basically anything that happens post you recording. So, and the live target is basically everything that happens while you're recording. And so what's cool here is now you can actually have UI elements that are shown in the live target during recording, but not shown in the capture target, which is after recording or in the final snap.
Exactly.
And so, for example, I could have a button on screen. The soundboard template, we actually updated it to use this system. So all the soundboard buttons, while you're recording, you could still press the buttons to enable sounds, but those buttons will never be in the final snap, which is really what we wanted to do with soundboard, but we didn't have this technology. So now we do.
Okay, cool. So how can we get the painting effect? It's super simple. There is a checkbox in here in the paint render target. You just like select that. In the inspector panel, there is a checkbox called clear color. When you just like disable it, start doing the painting effect.
Sneaky.
Yeah, what it does, it just like, it doesn't clear the previous frame and it draws on top of the previous frame. Like whatever
Right.
you draw, it draw on top of
So
that.
it's always adding to the render target,
Exactly,
basically.
yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, but the first problem that we're facing right now is the background is always gets drawn for one frame, and we don't want that to happen, so we just need a background for our painting. To add the background, it's simple as just like adding the screen image. We add the screen image.
Apoc says adding a fake pimple in the capture target. Yeah, that's funny. We always thought about going the other way, where it's like, well, people want to see stuff in the live camera that they don't show in the capture, and we didn't think of the use case of you want to show stuff in the live camera that you you want to show stuff in the capture that you don't show in the live. That's really funny.
So I added the white image and I make it as a fill to fill the screen, but now you cannot see the square anymore because the color is white. So what I'm gonna do is create the new unlit material, and I don't need that texture, and gonna set that as a white, or I can just like, I can set it as none, but for now I keep it like that. I put it here, and I can change the color easily right now. So if you, okay. So what is the problem right now that it's not drawing? Because there is an image behind it that it's covering the clear color, and when I disable it, the painting continues, but whenever we have it, it doesn't show it. So what we're gonna do is just like disable this screen image just like 1 second after the lens load. So the fastest way, and I'm so lazy, I don't want to code. The fastest way to do that, I go to add new and just like search for behavior.
So we've actually walked through behavior script before on the stream, which you used to have to download on Lens Studio website, but now behavior script in Lens Studio 2.0 is built into the objects panel and also the resources panel under add new. So you no longer have to go to the website. We also added new features to the behavior script, like for example, you can drive text. You weren't able to do that before. But I think the biggest thing is that now it's built into the tool.
Okay. So let's set the trigger to on lens turn on, and I want it to be after 1 millisecond to disable my background. And okay, now we should be able to paint on a white background.
And then when you refresh,
Yeah.
it re-enables that white image,
Yeah.
but then disables it really
Yeah.
quickly, which clears everything.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So another thing that I don't like is our brush actually. Like
Yeah.
it's just like a square.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I added that fade sphere texture, and I'm gonna apply it to the hand tracking. Ooh, I apply it to the background. Okay. So yeah. So we don't get any fade. The problem is we need to go to unlit material and send the blend to normal.
Yeah, anytime you guys create a material that you want to use alpha in the unlit, you're gonna want to make sure you always set the blend mode to normal, which it's not enabled by default.
Yeah.
So now I've made a pretty fun painting application. This is cool.
Yeah. So you can just like easily change the color and make a painting app.
New challenge, yeah. Anybody wants to make MS Paint, go for it. You have the power.
And brush, I'm gonna rename this one to background.
Finger
Okay.
painting in AR. Yeah.
Okay. So the last step that we need to do is just like combining these two together. Like my first render target, which is this one,
Mm-hmm.
with this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, to do that, I'm gonna create a new camera,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna call it like Final Mix Camera.
So this is like a copy of the orthographic
Yeah,
camera.
I
right?
duplicate it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna create a new layer. Like Final Camera, and then I don't need that. I just need one image, like Final Mix image.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and also make sure to set the layer on this one as well onto Final Camera to only gets drawn into the Final Camera. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, let me disable this and go back to our main render target, because this is the background we want to have for our painting.
Right.
And then what I'm gonna do in the final mix, I'm gonna add the other render target as a texture to here and turn on the component, and we don't see it. So what's the problem? Here, let me.
Well, the output on the render target
Oh,
for
yeah,
final
yeah,
mix
yeah,
needs
yeah.
to be on main,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
This is one thing that I'll mention is it's the best way to be optimized when working with multiple cameras is to always have multiple cameras point to the same render target.
Yeah.
Kind of put simply, it sort of depends, but the more render targets you have, the more performance costs that you incur. But if you have multiple cameras pointing to the same render target, it's going to be cheaper than two cameras pointing to two different render targets.
Exactly.
So anytime you can kind of bring multiple cameras into the same render target, it's going to be preferred from a performance standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Also just from an ease of use standpoint, because then you only have to really worry about one render target. One of the questions is, well then how do I make one camera above the other camera? And that's what the render order is, and dragging and dropping within the render target in the panel.
Yes.
That's what that's for.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what I'm gonna do right now is just like for now put it on multiply, and this is green. We're painting green on top of green, so I'm gonna change it to red so we can just like. Okay, so now we're painting something here.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we achieve that effects that I showed to you
Right.
earlier? So what we're gonna do is first set the. Let me create a new material for here. I'm gonna go here and search for onlet,
Mm-hmm.
create a new material, and put it here. And then I'm gonna set my dirt texture as a main texture. And the last thing that we're gonna do is click on opacity and make sure blend mode is on normal. And then set the paint render target as a texture here. But it's not working. The problem is our faded sphere color right now, it's pink. We're gonna need to make it black. So
Right, because mask works as black and white.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're changing it. We're cleaning the windows. I can just like put it as a screen, or I don't know, let's do multiply for here so we can see it.
Can you refresh?
Yeah. And you can make this, of course, bigger,
Whoa.
or also reduce the alpha, so make the you have to
Oh,
work
yeah.
out to
Come on. Oh, that's funny.
You're doing it.
Oh, because every time on the mask, it's just getting
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
more dark
Yeah.
until it becomes black. That's
Yeah.
funny.
That's a good workout, actually.
Wait, can you show me what the mask looks like on this by setting the capture target?
Yeah, I can go back to here.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's light gray down here, and then if I up here,
Yeah.
it becomes more dark.
Yeah, yeah,
black, 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 black,
Yeah.
black, and then if we show that in the main render target now,
Yeah.
that well.
Oh, it resets that,
It
yeah.
resets, but that's basically what's happening behind the screens in that render
Yeah.
target. That's so funny. It's awesome. Cool. Well, I think there's two really interesting things here at play is like using your hand to be interactive beyond just like attaching something to your hand.
Mhm.
So you can imagine like being able to paint the screen or the inverse of that, but also like maybe there's like for example like a piano around the screen, and as you're moving around it plays different music and stuff, so you can kind of think of the hand not just as a thing to attach to,
Yeah.
but as like almost like a mouse cursor,
Mhm.
like or an interactable element now in the scene, which is pretty neat. And then the technique that Amir showed with being able to use basically disabling clear mask. Sorry, what was it called? Clear color.
Clear color, yeah.
Clear color, to be able to get this kind of like additive effect to the render texture and be able to do stuff like paintbrushes without, you know, the more complicated way to do a paintbrush is
Yeah.
to use like, for example, to procedurally build meshes. It gets really complicated. This is like a one checkbox way to
Yeah.
get a paintbrush, which is really neat.
And one more thing I can just like add to it, like you can just like simply invert the mask, like by adding like, I'm gonna add the onlet and make that white. And what I'm gonna do is inverting the mask and on onlet, make this white. And what we're gonna do, this one is just like you can paint texture instead of just like having
That's
one
cool.
color. It's the opposite. Like there's endless possibility to create stuff in here.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You could even like, you could paint on a post effect
Oh yeah.
here.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's
a good
cool.
idea. Yeah.
That's cool. All right, cool. Well, that was fun. Really cool lens. Like before, we're gonna share this lens back on the forum as a downloadable zip, so it's now a new template or a new project you guys can play with. Would love to see kind of versions of this lens out there in the lens world. But yeah, really excited to see what everybody's doing with Lens Studio 2.0. It's already been like amazing to see how many new creations, new ideas are coming through in Lens Explorer and through the community. It's been awesome, and really excited to see that continue and see more of that. And so the other thing I forgot to mention is we're actually taking these Twitch streams too and putting it on the YouTube as well, on the Lens Studio YouTube. So you'll be able to go refer to all of this nonsense on the YouTube as well. And so yeah, I think that's it for us. So thanks so much for joining, and yeah. Keep making some amazing lenses. I think one last thing is if anybody does have any questions on the chat, we're happy